And cut.
All right, so here we are.
Top one is literally 1 minute, like it's a forgotten overload. I know I always say that, but like we
There's
forgot one
no
overload.
way
And
this
Victor's
is
on the
1
string
minute.
too, so we could go over it.
Okay,
But let's do this.
okay, go Victor.
Was on the string.
Hi, email you should probably refresh the issue.
What have I done?
He just opened it.
I removed the flag from that. That's not ready, so you probably should refresh your issues list on GitHub.
Oh, it's not ready for review?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. I thought it was just a simple overload.
You did not. It still says ready for review.
What's wrong with it, Victor? It just seems like exact match of index of.
Yeah, I had no time to add some examples, which Emo wanted to.
Oh, you want examples? We have index of already. You just forgot to put last index of with the string comparison here.
Oh, am I looking? Oh, I'm looking onto the wrong. Sorry, that's fine, yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Let me just quickly look at string, because otherwise it's usually what I try to look at is the existing ones.
And that's 1 minute.
So last index of string
Sounds like a proof to me.
Index. So it takes.
Yeah, so the issue here is that index of has the string comparison overload last index of. We just forgot that.
Now we're adding. Where do those extension methods live? Span extensions. Okay. God, that's one thing I hate. Maybe I should change
Memory
the catalog
extensions,
to actually. Memory extensions?
Yeah, memory extensions.
Yeah, that's what I thought because the other one doesn't exist. Alright.
And the parameters are span value comparison type.
Last index of.
Amazing.
Span, read only spans. So it's read only span, read only spans. Okay. Makes sense to me. Any concerns with anybody? Otherwise, that's it.
Did we say that's not the right type? It's not span extension, it's memory extension?
Yeah, like I mean, I think the title is wrong.
Yeah,
but,
it'll go in memory extensions.
but there's no such thing as span extensions. So
Yeah,
you can't
okay.
put anywhere else.
I'm just,
Can we change memory extensions?
To what?
As in, can we add APIs to it?
Are we in a broken half
so we can't add it
inbox?
to anything that's not standard target. It can only be added to code. We can add APIs to it.
So I'm sorry, what I understand is that
Is there going to be a different, like, net standard version for memory extensions index of and memory extensions last index of? Like, are we precluding?
There's living the NuGet package targeting on standard, they cannot be added there. Because they're inbox on an existing framework now. So they can only be added targeting core.
So where are the inbox?
I've done that core.
Oh, that's the whole point. Yeah.
Theoretically, UAP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just trying to look and see if there's any other ones missing from a consistency perspective.
All right. So
Did you guys compare the other?
I had a quick look at the index of and last index of. Yeah.
okay. I think Steven is online.
Steven's out today, isn't he?
It seems like it. He's not online.
So maybe we'll wait till next week.
Well, I mean, I would just give it a quick read and see whether there's any problem with it. Otherwise,
Yeah, so this is adding very specific extension methods onto read-only memory of char in addition to read-only span of char. Prim is a big one that keeps coming up in our internal reviews.
do we have any extension methods for memory right now?
Not really. We try to get people to go towards span because you're going to get better performance that way. But if we consider that read-only memory of char is the official substring type, then it starts making sense to put string-like methods on that type, right?
Yeah, it does. But like the thing that I don't, and I think that I said this before, what I don't like is that we have a mass proliferation of types then, right? Like that's the thing that, and like I think if we go down the path, like I would not approve those. I would just say make it consistent between span and memory.
So you can actually accomplish this scenario today, but it's a bit weird. Because what you have to do is you have to get the span out of the read-only memory. You call trim on the span, or you call trim start or trim end. You look at the length of the span that was returned by it, and then you manually slice the read-only memory that you had to the same length. So it is possible, it's just like a 3-step process.
Sure, but what makes these methods special?
Because like split, I mean, I don't really have split off of the span, but like all of the stringy methods would be the same. You've got the memory and you don't know where the span came from in that memory.
There is benefit to being able to using read-only memory over read-only span in the sense that you're often able to pull the string back out of the read-only memory. So you can use it to interlock with APIs that take like string offset length as their parameters. Whereas if all you had was span, you're kind of dead in the water.
Right.
You have to make a call.
I think the question is, where are the other 78 things that we would expect to be?
Like, why is there no index off? Why is there no last index off? Why is there no starts with? Like, what makes
I have a
special?
feeling that's coming. Well, things like index of, like, that you could relatively easily go back from span to memory because the index is going to be the same in both cases. But again, trim has this weird indirection. I don't know if that's a good argument for it. I'm just making an argument, right?
So I agree with Nemo that we shouldn't just pick and choose. We should be more holistic about it if we really care about read-only memory, which are being interesting in this concept.
Yeah.
We should provide the others.
One thing we could do is we are going to, over the next few weeks, have a review for the UTF-8 APIs that are going to look similar to this.
Yeah.
We can say the APIs that we approved there, we can start making UTF-16 equivalents of them. Right? If we decide we need trim on one, we should put it on the other.
It's going to be a nightmare.
It'll be fine.
All right, so I think then this one is covered. Back to Stephen, he has more details on why he needs that one but not the other. That one seems like a fine one. Ben just says trimming for heapable can trim span and have it persistent across async. That's true, but I think that's probably true for all the operations that end up. Well, I guess trim is the only one that modifies it right now, right? That probably makes it special. But anyway, all right, so.
So my immediate gut reaction here is this looks safe, but it's really not. Because even if we do a length check, you have alignment issues. So portability caveats, yeah.
So, well, how is this change? How is this safe in principle? I mean, it's exactly as unsafe as any other operations that we have there, right? You're basically doing a reinterpret and cast over a sequence of bytes.
I mean, it's convenient to be able to do this.
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't have it. All I'm saying is you said it looks safe. Like, it doesn't look safe to me at all because you just say, here's a bunch of bytes, give me back the key that represents.
No, it looks safe because you didn't use an asterisk or the word unsafe.
Yeah. It's the same problem we have with memory marshal in general.
Also, what you say, memory marshal all up is unsafe.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, so that's, okay, let me say the same thing. So what does read take? Like, how is memory marshal read different from this one? I still don't get it.
I believe that returns the actual struct rather than a reference to the struct.
Oh, this one is ref-t?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Which means you don't have a stack copy of it, which is convenient.
I see. So read gives you back the t. So I like that, but why would we call it like this? Why wouldn't we just call it read reference? Shouldn't this be logically an overload of read? I guess read kind of implies you're consuming it, right? Or copying it, I guess is the way.
So is the issue here that we're just trying to make it less likely to encounter buffer overruns by not requiring like calls into unsafe.s?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Or get reference
It
runs?
seems like if you want the speed, you'll do the unsafe thing and potentially struct map well beyond the end of the struct, or the end of the span, which would be a data contract violation and possibly
Do we see anyone using this in practice? Like if you're trying to avoid making a copy of the struct, are you also going to try avoiding the length check? And at that point, are you just going to fall back to using get reference and unsafe as anyway?
if you're going to skip the length check, you and I would yell at them if we saw the code. So,
Well, I mean, you might be able to reason upfront about the length, right? Because maybe you don't have a buffer.
I mean, I think that there's a difference between having a 10K-ish struct, and I mean, that would be a really big struct, but I guess the structs I'm thinking of are all the with data concatenated at the end, which is really handle.
Does memory marshal get reference return a read-only ref or just a ref?
A regular ref.
Why is it not create a read-only ref?
Because you're using an unsafe API. Like, why should we care about cost constraints?
It's 99% likelihood you're turning it into a pointer. So,
I'm trying to figure out if this API in particular leads people into a bit of failure, just in the sense that if you have an arbitrary span, then that means the span presumably was also sliced in an arbitrary fashion, which means that how do you know that what you're getting back is actually properly aligned?
yeah, I mean, as I said, caveat cast. Apparently, you have a thing that already does it. And this is the same thing.
That cast, we only ever, in our internal code review, we only ever allow narrowing operations on the cast, as in you can go from char to byte, but not from byte to char. We disallow it in our internal code reviews. This, in an internal code review, is necessarily a widening operation, because you're going from byte to something bigger than byte, which means this would always get rejected in our internal code reviews if anyone called it.
So I think there's, from my point of view, nothing fundamentally wrong with the API. I mean, you basically do the exact same thing that get reference does. The only thing is you add length check to it, logically, right?
No, but what I'm saying is this, do we have a use case for this API?
Well, it's the same as get reference, but I would like to have a bounce check for it.
No, it's get reference and unsafe as together. And unsafe as, like if we see you going from unsafe as byte to int, for instance, without doing an alignment check ahead of time.
Why would you have to use them together?
Hmm?
Why would you have to use them to? Oh, because you have to go from read-only span of bytes to read-only span of t.
Yeah. And that would fail our internal code review policies. So I don't see any examples of where, can you scroll down? Like, are there cases where people can use this?
Well, I mean, I don't think Jan just cooked it up then, so.
No, I agree with that. But
Okay, I mean, what's his name? Yeah, that's the other way. That makes sense. Yeah, and here's the actual examples.
So PA.
What was the method called again?
Presumably he's using get reference,
That's right.
which is probably in the,
Ending
if this
close.
diff is too big. I'm
No,
not
he
sure.
he wouldn't be using get reference because he's
That little diff right there.
because he's going from void star to span back to reference.
He has a stub right there, a
Yeah.
private helper that does it. So search for as struct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is convenient.
Yeah.
I mean, like trying to write this. I mean, as convenient as putting refs fucking everywhere is in C#, but yeah.
I mean, like, on the one hand, effectively, this is the same thing as just taking the fixed byte star and then making a perf data block star and assigning it to the same pointer.
Yeah, I mean, without this, all we do is basically ask people to write the 3 lines themselves, right?
Well, without this, you would just tell people use a fixed date and a pointer.
x86 will do a misalignment. ARM won't.
It will nowadays, but it's not future proof. That's the thing. There might be future processors where it doesn't work. And now you could end up with this ecosystem of DLLs that only works on certain architectures, even though it needs to be it.
And what's the behavior?
On ARM, ARM used to fault. Nowadays, it will actually fix stuff up for you, just like x86. But hopefully, you're not doing like interlocked operations within the struct, because those are always going to fail across all architectures. As an example. Sure.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to get is like, what is the problem with the API? Because I would argue that, I don't know what he's doing here, but all this unrelated.
I mean, really the question of how much of a pit of failure is it is, do you think that anybody would use this that wouldn't already just write unsafe and use pointer coercion and then this is safer than that because we do a length check.
We do a length check, and like, I mean, in general, the problem is once you give people pointers and you rely on casting, like anything goes, right? It's super easy to fuck it up. Whereas this one at least gives you some sort of type coercion where it's like, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a good example of where we know that the data coming in is safe, because it's already properly aligned.
I mean, in general, I would not give these people, you know, APIs that are on span, right? But like they're already on memory Marshall. I mean, they're already like
Ready for you to copy and paste from Stack Overflow without knowing the full consequences of your decisions.
Yeah. So my
yeah,
only
but
question
that's the same thing with a copy and paste pointer code. Right? I mean, like that's. I mean, if you copy arbitrary code you don't read, then I mean, at that point you give up already on the.
does this meet our usage of the verb as? Or should
think
it be
it does, yeah.
interpret as struct? Because the C++ equivalent would be a reinterpret cast. So putting the word interpret in there somewhere, like we're going off the rails and doing like you have left sanity.
I mean,
Hopefully you land
unsaved.as
in
does the
sanity.
same thing, right? It turns a ref from one thing into a ref to another thing. So there is precedent for that.
I mean, as is basically our version of reinterpret. I mean, we already have as bytes, which takes a span of t and gives it back a span of byte. I mean, that's effectively the terminology we're using. I'm not sure it's better, but that's the one we unfortunately settled on. I think naming-wise makes sense. I don't know. I would call it probably not.
There
As
was the
struct,
question
but,
of
yeah.
do we have the right constraint on it?
can't really do any better than that, can you?
What would you do?
Somebody suggested that we have an unsafe constraint or a native or
Does it exist? Does it?
unmanaged.
yeah.
There's no. Does that exist? Unmanaged constraint.
AsRef is a name we use elsewhere.
Jan says no. Okay.
So I am curious about, you guys both said that you wouldn't let us let people use this in code reviews. So
In the particular case it's being used here, it's safe because you fully own the buffer that you're reading from. It hasn't been sliced arbitrarily.
okay,
I see.
you allocated it yourself right in the same
Yeah.
same line of sight essentially.
Well, it's also being returned from a p invoke, so it's guaranteed to be correctly aligned. But you only know that because it's being returned as a pointer, which you've turned back into a span.
Do we have any good ways of doing alignment checks as part of the implementation of this?
Oh, absolutely.
So we should do alignment and link checks then.
Well, you'll want, the link check should probably be in there anyway. The alignment check we can put in the debug build.
Yeah, or we put in a memory marshal.as struct aligned and it throws if ref isn't aligned.
How will you check that?
Alignment would require some, checking the alignment would require changes to CLR, but we can do it. Like we can make those checks. I don't know if we should be doing it, but because none of our other APIs do. Like memory marshal.cast doesn't check alignment, I believe.
Yeah, he said see also portability. So that's why I'm saying we could add a second one, which is
Yeah.
the
I do recommend the name AsRef just because it follows unsafe.asref.
Is it returning a struct though?
What's that? Unsafe AsRef takes a void star and returns a reft. This is effectively pulling a void star out of the span and returning a reft.
I think as reference is probably a better name. I didn't like struct either. I was thinking as value or something, but that's really weird, or as structure at least. But yeah, I think get reference. As reference.
Do we want to think of it as exactly as ref then, except for it's on read-only span instead of a void star? Basically, just an overload of it.
Well, AsRef right now is on unsafe.
I know it's on. I know it's on unsafe.
Oh, we actually have it already.
Yeah, unsafe.asref.
I mean, in that case, I think that's the name we should be using regardless.
And the API is, the API is like mentally the same, right? Void star in, reft out.
Right. Yeah. I try to avoid thinking about the unsafe type just because it's scary.
And memory marshal's not.
Memory marshal is pretty scary too. But
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, I think we can align it with unsafe, and it's all in memory marshal because it's working on the types that memory marshal works on, which is spans.
Like an actual unaligned keyword in C#, just like C++.
Any concerns? Otherwise, that's it.
As reference as opposed to AsRef.
Oh, is it called as ref?
It's literally called AsRef, REF.
Oh, that's how we called it. That's how we called it. Embedded system runtime interrupt services unsafe, right?
The only difference between this and the unsafe one, though, is that this constraint is constrained to a struct. I don't think unsafe is constrained at all, is it?
Correct. But I think unsafe.asref will fail. One sec. Actually, I don't know what it does if you pass in a reference type. Oh, no, it works. It works if you pass in a reference type. Because we sometimes reinterpret cast object references as in pointer references.
All right, then let's go for this one. I mean, to me, honestly, constraints don't matter in this context because they're logically overloads, right? So they're more constrained, whatever, like who cares? I mean,
No, I'm fine with this being constrained to this struct. Like this struct. Pointing out that that's the difference between the two.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to allow it to be anything other than struct.
well, especially because you blow up anyway, right? So might as well just enforce it if you can. All right. All right, that was the other one.
That's mine for today. Okay.
So yeah, let's skip networking because Carol isn't here and it probably doesn't make much sense. YouTube type we will not do today. Not that I don't like it, I just think I'm not sure it makes your code much easier than before. Instead of having a normal for loop, you know, put everything in a lambda expression and then I'm skeptical, I have to say. It's not that it's wrong, it's just, I don't know, it seems pretty heavy-handed for what it's supposed to do. Are the only one who has that reaction, or?
Let me read it first.
Oh, you would read it? Come on. Shoot from the hip. Opinions are free.
You guys discussed this offline, right? So yeah, there's probably been sufficient discussion on this already. You think, Emma?
I have not seen any.
I don't think Emma was in those
I
discussions.
literally just saw it for the first time and had a knee-jerk reaction to it. That's why I'm asking what anybody else has.
How much discussion do you want to have in this?
Not a whole lot.
Have you got context on that, Emma?
I have no context on this. I know.
Okay, so either we could not talk about this, or not talk about this right now.
So I mean, like, yeah, I can just talk with you offline then.
Okay, we go on to the next one.
What else do we have? Interlocked. I believe we talked about this one.
We did, and then there was some homework. I can't remember who it was for.
This one, I think we said we want to talk with Morgan about this in more detail at some point. This one, I believe I pinged and I didn't get a response, but we still didn't get a response. Did I get a response from him now? Nope. All right. Yeah, this one I think was in the same bucket as you said.
Oh yeah, we thought that maybe a subname fix would go then.
Was there more like, did you talk to them?
So I did actually talk with Carol. It should be okay.
Yeah.
It is allowing you to specify a memory order for things like compare exchange should be okay. Like, it might not do exactly what you want, but we can at least If you pass in something weak and we do something stronger, so be it.
So then, I see. I think we said last time we bind the proof argument for some architectures at least, right?
Yeah.
So then, well.
There wasn't any discussion on the very last comment that I made, though, which maybe is an implementation detail, but basically just to say, like, they were considering a compiler or JIT feature or something that required you to specify a const as a parameter, like an actual literal, as opposed to something that has a variable value. I don't know the status of that feature, but if that feature were available, we should potentially utilize it for these APIs.
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense to have a giant switch statement at runtime. Because, like, yeah.
I see.
Having a switch statement at runtime is a dynamic fallback for if it gets invoked via reflection or anything else would still be required, or it would need a...
No, I would just say, like, I don't care what you specified. If it weren't a compile time constant, you get the strongest ordering possible.
Right.
Like, it just makes our logic so much easier internally.
I just mean the like having the implementation be the switch statement and then the JIT know, like, or the JIT understand what to do with it's like essentially define it as a recursive calling itself,
Right.
except the JIT knows, oh, now that there's a const here, I know what to write down. Like, as long as the JIT would do that, then we can define the method that way, and it doesn't matter if you hit the runtime switch or you hit the compile time inline.
Right.
But that would be
But again, it's an implementation.
a JIT.
detail,
Yeah,
so-
a JIT.
Yeah.
But we talked about the API last time, and I think we said it was a fine API, right?
I think so. Yeah. I was just reading. Let me just search for more comments here. That was basically what we said last time. So, as I said, I have generally no problem with having overloads that are more powerful. I think they're already longer. They're less likely to be chosen by people that don't care. The only overhead you have is if you roll an enum in the namespace. But I don't know, like system threading is already a namespace that is not particularly.
Do we need memory order outside of Interlocked?
Oh, for fuck's sake.
So what would it'd be system threading interlocked advanced or something?
No, I mean, like, if
Or it's
the
just-
only place that the enum ever makes sense is to usage on the interlocked class, then that would be a time that we would make a nested public enum.
Oh, sorry. I thought what we were also considering is moving the memory order ones onto like a different class. I thought that was being considered.
Well, I think
So
what we
that if
said
you do
last time is
interlock
that
dot, that you don't
having
get
a
too
different
confused.
interlock type seems fairly heavy-handed because now you no longer see them as overloads. Right now they are far apart from each other, so that makes I think that's
Don't we already have these types duplicated in other places too?
bit of a
We
memory
created
order.
this interlock class as when we were trying to decouple thread. So there's some of these things already existing.
I think the only one that we have is immutable interlock because we couldn't put it anywhere else.
As far as embedding the enum, I thought that we explicitly, the framework guidelines say don't use nested types.
Yeah, we generally don't do them for things like that.
Well, except then Christoph, who is the guidelines, will tell you if it doesn't make sense outside one, or if it only will ever belong to one type, then make it a thing instead of putting it in
Do we have other examples?
Yes, and it sucks. Environment, for example, special folder name.
Oh, so I have to do environment.special folder? That's true.
Like
But
in
that's
general, like
different because that's in
when
system.
I know
Like,
there's-
you put something in
I
system,
know
you're
there's
like,
one recently that he
so
had
the-
me move it from a outside enum type to an inside enum type.
yes, I mean, but that is usually for things that you rarely if ever have to use, right?
so the,
I mean,
the
maybe
problem
that's
is
okay
I do
here.
using system threading, which I think most people don't do in most
Right.
files, and then I type M,
Then you type what?
and
M.
it starts completing memory order. Is that confusing? Because if not, then we should leave it where it is.
Well, what else would you like to use?
I guess what I'm thinking.
Menu reset event, slim, monitor, or mutex, because those are the only things that show up.
Compare exchanges only have.
And the reset event, mutex is pretty common.
And then you type mu and it already completes.
Yeah, so I think I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Having it in a namespace like that, I don't think there's a good enough reason.
I think the problem with basic nested types is that they're undiscoverable. They're super hard to use. It's just annoying.
Well, the counter argument to being undiscoverable is you probably only use it as a parameter to this function. You're never going to use it yourself. So the discoverability is kind of taken care of by hitting comma.
Yes, so
Right.
Christoph's argument would be the only time that you'd be using this, at least the one I'm projecting, is you would be
Christoph.
you would
Well,
write
what
compare
Jan would
exchange,
say-
you would do some stuff, you'd hit comma, and then IntelliSense will tell you like, oh, there's this overload here, and you click or hit tab or whatever you particularly do, and IntelliSense writes down for you interlocked.memoryOrder dot. And
So another counter argument is, are we confident we would never use this in our menu or else? At which point it would be very inconvenient.
So as a counterexample, Ben Adams just brought up in chat, there is a proposal for an atomic type, which is similar to interlocked, but would actually not be in the interlocked class. And that type would presumably have memory order as an API parameter for its.
Yeah, I think that's a good
I think that was the.
Nope.
Will it make sense outside?
But you
the-
channel Christoph effectively.
Yeah.
And we'll just tell you no, just like we told Christoph no.
Yeah. Next time I'll read what Anders would say.
Well, I can say what Immo would say, if that helps you.
You often do.
I can channel him fairly well.
I mean, this is a system threading namespace, so I don't think it's all that bad for there to be an enum there, right? It's not
Yeah,
really
it's
going
okay.
to pollute things.
It's not in the default template as far as I remember, right?
Jeremy would say that there should be a comma after relax, and that the language should have required that.
Is this Jeremy or the other Jeremy?
This Jeremy.
Both of them.
This Jeremy hates when enums don't end with commas. Because it
And
makes
for
the next
tabs
yeah.
and
it makes the next edit a 2-line diff instead of a
Yeah.
1-line diff.
All right, then.
No, I agree with you.
That should not have been comma opt.
Yeah, for similar reasons, whenever I add a string, never add it to the bottom. Anything in a list goes at the random location.
But you're excluding the top and you're excluding the bottom. It's not very random.
I wonder if someone will do like interlocked or interlocked excellent anything.
All right, so control R.
Before you go on to that, is memory order the right name for the enum? Sorry.
That's what you call it.
I don't know, but when I read the enum values, it doesn't, I don't know, maybe I'm just not
Memory
thinking about it.
semantics.
C++ calls it memory order.
Does it?
Yeah. If you're coming from a C++ background, that is the type you're going to be looking for.
I'm not sure that's the language I would look for naming it.
No, but it is. If you're looking for these APIs, like you're probably coming from that background.
What
So
does it
helps.
say in like the ARM or Intel manuals?
Yeah, what is the official name for that? It's probably like a.
Intel doesn't have a concept of this outside of Itanium.
Oh, because it's ARM basically.
Okay, so
yeah,
ARM developer manuals. Wait, see.
it's called memory ordering guarantees.
Oh, you just found it?
Yeah.
Why is it you found it?
No, I just.
I mean,
Made sure
Wikipedia has a page memory ordering, which
Okay, that's,
Seems
I
to
don't
be
have
about
a
the same
strong
thing.
opinion, I was just curious.
Yeah, to
ARM
me
calls
it's
it
like
memory
I think the
ordering.
name makes sense. I don't know about the Eno members though because I read them the first time and I have literally no idea. What any of
I
these
can't
things
point to
mean.
what the
Like,
really
just go
to.
back.
Yeah.
Actually, end release looks like it's been deprecated.
All right.
One sec.
I'll make sure the Eno members are sensitive.
Yeah.
And the name
Yeah, it calls it memory ordering semantics in the ARM documentation.
Yeah, we need to look into why release was deprecated.
So the only other option, I guess, is memory ordering semantics.
also
That's a bit confusing.
right. Toggle this back then. And somebody else can do the design work on that one. All right, needs to work. Approved. Done. And here we go. Back to square one. Pass span APIs about a specific buffer. And I think this one we did. This is all intrinsic stuff. And child. Let's go. Gee, my network is.
Given as much as we skip over them, should the intrinsics be marked as ready for review, or should we remove that flag?
No, we should. They are basically ready, but we need to do a round with like all up. Unfortunately, we filed, or they filed, I should say, too many of them. We should just have one big move item for those. But Tanner is joining the team. Yeah, like we'll get a holistic view of this. Oh yeah, those are the ones. So
Titanium calls it memory ordering. There you go.
Did I ever look into those? Did I ever look into any of those? I can search it.
So are we talking about the path APIs? Because these are ones that we approved, and then Jan pushed back because he felt that Jeremy was over-optimizing for performance at the expense of usability, and he wanted to see some examples of it written out.
Right, I see.
Jan said that?
Yeah.
Otis?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he actually said, but I mean, that was
We're converting them. Ha, ha.
That was my reading of this. So, are these the examples that Jeremy created? Yeah. So we should look at examples and decide if they're acceptable.
I mean, from Jan's point of view, it makes sense. I mean, Jan generally is a friend of black and white split of APIs, like, you know, either completely safe or completely unsafe, or you're super usable or you're high performant. Like, he generally dislikes the slippery slope, if you will, when you have a type that does half-assed both things at the same time.
So what?
And I would agree that these are not the APIs you're very likely to call in a loop. I mean,
so I at the risk of misrepresenting Jeremy, I think he believes these are important because we've added span overloads for a lot of the rest of path, like path combine and so forth, where it makes blindingly obvious sense. And so it's a consistency thing. And yet the argument being made here is also one of performance. And Jan's pushback is that performance ever realistically matters for getting temp path or even getting random file name. Because you're about to do IO anyway. Yeah, right.
I mean, that doesn't mean that you really want to be, for all of the things that you have to process, and you're saying I need a temp file to write this down, that you necessarily want to throw that string out of the GC.
So get temp path, I think, is a pretty weak argument, because I mean, if you really cared about the performance of getting that one string, you would just keep it. Yeah. So get random file name, you could repeatedly do that. Get random file name, unlike get temp file name doesn't make a file, and you are about to write a file, but it's something you potentially do a lot. Get relative path, that's path manipulation, that seems completely consistent.
A relative path and full path I can totally see doing it.
Yeah, I'm not sure why there was pushback on those two. Maybe it was a usability thing.
I think, yeah, and then the question is the first two, like, who gives a fuck, right? Like, once we do the others, we might as well just do these two. But yeah, they will probably not be very popular.
Are they correctly formatted in terms of, I mean, it's the try pattern. We're all taking span, or and out, child's written at the end. That's the normal pattern, right? So we have nothing to say about the usability of that pattern.
Oh, sure we do.
Well, I was about to say.
We just can't say it in polite company.
We do, it's just that's the best we can. I mean, like...
Well, I mean, there was one member of the community who suggested returning a tuple as a ball and an int, which we obviously decided not to do. Because I don't think we have any APIs that return tuples. So.
Well, the problem with that is
I don't know
I
why
think,
that is.
I forgot what the discussion was. I think we discussed this with Christoph and others. So they did the same thing in Midori, and they found out that there is something like that, and like returning stuff versus out parameters, you think of them are logically the same, but they're not physically the same. They have different
You
performance.
mean the code gen?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me because the code gen could just return it as an out parameter.
Well,
Well,
I
an
forgot the
out parameter,
details, but like
yeah.
they looked into that, and like in Midori was even worse because they had like the normal try pattern is you have an out with a reference type, right? When you say try parse, for example, and you construct a reference type or whatever. And normally we return the bool and we have the reference type as the out. Midori inverted that because apparently if the reference type is returned, it's better than the reference type as an out parameter for the way the GC is working, the way you have to do the fucking
But
write barriers.
that
and
sounds like a case of
like
having
the-
to write code to work around limitations of the code gen.
yeah. Well, I mean they owned everything. I think they probably would have changed it otherwise. I
So it
mean,
doesn't
like
make sense
they,
to me. I could
but anyway,
rewrite
like,
it
I mean,
so-
I don't care one way or the other. It's the pattern we now have, and it's just you know.
So then the question is, in the examples, not how they would write the examples, but having written it out, whether anyone would actually do that.
So get temp have just literally returns the temp directory from the system, right? It's
That's
not.
right.
Yeah.
And then random file name is just a.
Get random file name is temp path plus 8.3 from some crypto output.
I need to stop pressing the wrong buttons here. Like,
Probably not using the right words.
We'll call it CSPRNG.
yeah, get temp path.
Okay, so Jeremy's now more nuanced about it.
And then temp directory getter, get temp path.
Get temp path is the one that returns just the path to temp and not
Yes.
a file under
That's
temp.
right. Get temp file name is the obsolete one that gives you that name that, for which there's only 65,000 in the entire machine. Something like that.
'Cause, yeah, I would agree that get temp file name. In fact, that one could probably cache it and return the same string every time.
Get temp path.
Sorry, get temp path. Yes.
If the OS API was slow, I don't know anyone that ever complained that it is.
Well, but I mean, if the complaint is that calling it in a loop means that there's GC fodder, then we can hold the reference and return the same reference.
Or
'cause it's
better
an
still,
immutable
the
string.
0.1% people who care about that could do it themselves.
True. And so I don't know that one makes sense to avoid but any of the ones that you would sensibly do on a per file basis, and they would get back different answers.
So is there a composability as well as a consistency in performance argument? So in other words, maybe try get random file name doesn't need to return a span, but if I'm using spans for all my other path operations and I'm about to use it as a span, I guess not really, right? Because if I got a string, I can convert it to a span.
Well, try get random file name you would do on a per, like,
Within the loop.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that one I think is fine. I'm saying
Okay.
that if we wanted to trim this down, I would say that we could avoid the get temp path.
Yeah.
Because that's going to write deterministically over and over and over.
Yeah, and that's something Jeremy comments on, actually, if you scroll down just a tiny bit.
Sorry. I guess what I meant was, what would you use try get random file name for that wouldn't take a string? Right? What am I going to do with the result of that? Maybe it's in his example. But if I'm just making a string anyway, I mean, like if I open it in a file stream, do we have file streams that take a span for the path?
I don't know, but I mean, presumably you might be throwing it into string.join.
Yeah.
And random file name is not qualified, right? It's literally just a bunch of characters, right? Or is it qualified?
It's fully qualified.
Well, then why would you pass it to join?
Because you want to suffix it. In fact, we're doing that in our tests. We do, we use it as a folder name to dump stuff below it.
Why does it need to be a try? Like, why can't it just throw if the span you give it is too small? Like, it's always going to return exactly 12 characters. Always. It's contracted to.
I think it's done in other places.
Well, he points that out. Span slice to length 12. I guess it's just a consistency thing.
Well, we shouldn't call it try if you always return a span. That seems very weird. Like try implies you return a boolean.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it's like if the caller has to check the Boolean return value anyway to see if it succeeded or failed, then the caller could also just check the length before calling the API to say, are you greater than or equal to 12?
So do we have consensus then that get temp path does not deserve it, the others do, and try get random file name should not be tried?
Well, because if we make it get random file name, which would then go back to being, or would, I don't know if it would return the span or if it would go to void and then just throw if you gave it anything other than 12. If it's literally contracted to write 12 characters, then maybe it should yell at you of, I expect to be called with 12 characters.
I don't understand how this API is, like, where does the span come from?
You pass it
The
in.
one it returns?
Why it returns, I don't know.
It's instead of outing the length, you returned destination.slice 0, 12.
The random path is what I pass in the first 12 characters?
No, it writes into
Yeah.
the destination and then tells you I wrote that to the first 12 characters by giving you
Yeah.
a span over the first
Like
12
it
characters.
literally always returns 8.3 file names. Always.
But why you couldn't just trim the thing, the array pool, array, or whatever you're passing in to 12, I don't know.
Right, so that's why I would think that this, if we're going to do that, we would make this get random file name, and it throws an argument exception if destination.length is not equal to 12.
So get random file name is documented today, presumably
Did you just see what I saw?
to give you 12.
It's so the documentation just says it returns a random file name. The source, like the dev doc and the source code itself, is hard coded to A3. Like we're never changing it because if we change it, it would break people.
Why would it break people who are using strings?
Because maybe you rely on string.length being 12.
Yeah.
Like sillier things that
I don't
happen.
know why I thought that was a fully qualified path. Mixing or something.
Just because it calls an API random doesn't mean you're allowed to return random values. I mean, you know how this thing works.
You haven't seen my code.
Yeah.
Also because it looks like some people call get random file name and then immediately strip off the last 4 characters in order to get 8 random characters without an extension.
This is one of those areas where I wish like one of the feature programmers would be here, like
Yeah.
I don't know, even Steven or Christoph.
So maybe we could allow it to be 8 or 12, and we throw if it's anything other than 8.
But
We spent too long on this.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with try get random file name, right? We just don't know if it's useful. And as written like
I think that is a fair assessment, yes. In which case my killer will actually kind of drops to 0. Anybody else? Otherwise, let's just approve and move on because I mean, yeah, I think the US summary is better.
Well, we're killing try get temp path though, right?
We could. I mean, like I don't care. Like it's one method.
It shouldn't change during the lifetime of a process. Somebody can call and get the string once. They can hold it for as long as they want to, and then they can copy it to whatever they want.
Let's remove.
To channel Christoph again. Don't add API that we don't need.
Because I mean, there was an argument made regarding like, well, it can change, but your application will probably get really confused if it does. Because now all of a sudden the data that it wrote no longer exists when it attempts to read it back again.
All right. He just, I think we had all of this last time. Let's look through it.
Can you send me a link to YouTube, please?
You know what? I don't have the link on this machine, but net designer machine.
All right. The VS guys are happy. And by VS guys, I mean the compiler guys.
Is anyone looking at the chat? Are you looking at the chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the request for this one? I worry a little bit about the dependency.
So the request, so it's basically the same thing that we already have. So basically what they need to be able to do is they need to store the data somewhere, right? So they put it in the data segment somewhere in the resulting PE file. And I forgot the details there, but there was an e-method with Jan. So effectively they have to store a type per size of the length, per length of the array or something today. And so effectively what you do is you load the data with a field handle, and like that's basically the thing we have. So like if you look at this API here, InitializeArray, looks like this.
It takes in an array. So the caller is responsible for allocating it. And
It takes the array and it takes the field handle, and then you just initialize it. And so the closest equivalent we could come up with is basically this. You're basically creating a span over the data. So effectively you pass in the field handle and it returns you the
How is
span.
that remain stack allocated? The runtime is,
It's not. It's a pointer to the heap.
but it returns a span.
Yeah, because it's a heap allocated entity. You're free to return a span to it.
So the idea is, right now, we store, let me back up a bit. So right now you can write read-only span of byte foo equals new byte, blah, 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 blah. And that doesn't actually allocate a byte array. What it does is it calls, the compiler special cases that and calls the read-only span constructor that takes a void star because it knows where the pointer to the data is because it's in the DLL's data segment.
Right.
For things like int, we can't do that because there are machine Indianness issues, right? So the idea is, if we have a method like this, then we could say, the compiler could emit a call to this, and the runtime can say, if the machine Indianness matches the Indianness of the DLL that was created, then I can just, at JIT time, replace it with a call to the void star constructor, end of story. If the Indianness has to be swapped, that can be done once. The thing's allocated on the garbage collected heap, and it just returns that single pointer.
Is there any reason why we didn't put it on span? A constructor on span as opposed to putting it on runtime helpers?
It's a compiler specific.
But you just told me the compiler already knows how to call the constructor on read-only span for
No,
other
this would be called by the constructor or by the compiler. There is an API on span, a public API that takes a void star that the compiler also calls, but we also expect application developers to call it, for instance, when coming back from pinvoke. This API, we don't expect app developers to call at all because they're generally not going to have access to the runtime field handle. This really is for compilers. So maybe it should even be under compiler services.
My only hesitation is that runtime helpers is a runtime type. This now ties span and runtime helpers together. You'll never be able to decouple them at that point. Which we may already be in that, but you will never be able to expose this, for example, on a framework without putting span in the box.
Which is fine because the compiler, if the compiler is targeting full framework, it will say, oh, the API doesn't exist, so I'm not going to use this.
Yeah.
And if the API is targeting .NET Core with the appropriate API, then it says I will call it, right? I mean, we already follow that pattern today in lots of places.
I know the compiler does light up like this.
Yeah.
But I don't have a huge concern with this. Don't like tying types. But
Well, okay, so if we put it on span, what would that look like? So just
presumably it'll be a constructor that took a runtime field handle.
So what was the question?
And then make it non-public or leave it
it
public?
has to be public.
No, it has to be called by the compiler, and it has to be allowed by the CLR. These are the things that have to be true.
Okay,
the word
fair.
public is completely optional.
No, that needs public. One of the purposes that means it's a public API. There's no internal APIs the compiler calls. Like we're not going down that path.
Yeah.
For sure not.
I mean, you could always, if you put it on span, you could always make it editor browsable, never,
Right.
because it's a compiler API.
Which we could, but I mean, given the type is called runtime helpers, and where does it live?
Well,
Compiler servers or something?
I'm saying, like, what if we put this on span, right?
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. that's
Runtime helpers is very tightly coupled to
Yeah.
runtime, and obviously,
This- it would have to be on fast span only. It can't be on portable span.
But that's the whole point, right? Because literally does the same thing as InitializeArray, right? Like logically.
So we would, I mean, do we have a separate contract for the, I guess we could put it in the netcore specific version of the ref for span pool.
well, this is going to go in system runtime for netcore. That's the only place it could go. It can't go anywhere else.
Yeah, but I don't know that we've split the ref for span.
Yeah.
So we'd have to split the ref, and then this would go on the netcore and UAP specifically.
Yeah, this seems like the if we
really need
don't
a
want to
term
split
for
span.
netcore or UAP, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't have a strong opinion. It just rubs me the wrong way a little bit for the coupling of them. I mean, I like a little bit dispute.
Coupling between what?
Span and runtime helpers.
Should we make a different static class for it?
No, it's not worth that. I would either put it on span or here. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, like it seems to, like, you know, the only logistical problem with putting it on span is we have to split the ref.
It could potentially go on memory.
Fine, almost.
I mean, possibly, but that's not the same problem.
Almost everything has a split ref these days.
So what's the problem? You just
There's
because
not
you don't-
really a problem.
I mean, if you put it anywhere else, like if you put it on span, how does it help you? Because it goes in the same contract as
But it can go under the netcore app and UAP specific contracts and not the net standard contract.
Because you need JIT support for this, or course
Runtime
support.
So then the compiler would say if it finds a span constructor under your target that is optimized, then it will. I guess
it's the same as
is
this
this a
API.
compiler thing or
It's a runtime feature.
thing?
Both a combination of both. I think.
It's both, because the compiler
Yeah.
has to know to call it, and the runtime has to know how to interpret it.
So this wouldn't help anybody who's building a library as net standard.
Correct. The compiler would not call it,
Yeah.
because the API wouldn't exist.
And just
Well, unless we edit, right?
No. I mean, if you're targeting something portable, we can't have this in the portable references on this.
Yes, we can.
Once we add,
How?
so we can put it in the net standard once we put
Yeah,
put
you
span.
just ref net standard. You add the method to it. Runtime helpers is net standard. You just add a member to it, and then
No, but I mean,
that's it.
how do you add this API without? Oh, you're saying in some future net
Yeah.
standard that also relies on the CLR feature.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that works.
but
So
at
the
same
compiler would
point,
call it if it's
yeah.
there. If it's
If we
not
put
there,
it
you gotta
on-
do it.
Because I'm like, how are you going to make this run on 472?
No, I don't.
So putting it on span and putting it on runtime helpers are the same.
Yeah, the coupling is already there. It doesn't. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. We're never
Yeah.
moving. We're never going to be successful to move span out. This basically will help. This another API where we could never rip it out. Of
Yeah.
The run. If we wanted to.
So then, any other concerns? Just approve and move on.
You can go.
All right. See, sometimes not paying attention for a while. So.
You're a great role model. You know?
We all have that problem.
I've done this in school all my year. Somehow I graduated. Fuck, that's a lot of text. I can only express that in text. Oh yeah, somebody brought this up the other day. Yeah, this is one thing where I think we need the compiler guys here, because do you guys have enough context on this? Because I don't think I'm able to judge whether this will work at all.
I have never
Right.
read or written a line of code that contained system link instructions.
So first of all, it's .NET Standard with all caps. Just saying.
Well, with
Already pisses
capital
me
N, E, and T.
It's already rejected because you didn't spell .NET correctly.
Do we know the parent?
You need to be prepared for these APIs to fail.
Why?
You might not be able to get your parent process.
For security reasons?
And Terry's, for instance, they forbid access to that information.
So you get access denied effectively?
I don't know what it returns.
Do they give you a handle that you just can't query on, or do they literally just give you not even a handle back?
I don't know how it works in their case. I mean, we should test it in that environment. It's just we need to make sure that the APIs are resilient against that.
Dan had looks like he has some note here of don't ask the PEB, ask some other API, and then but I don't know if we can get it on all platforms.
So maybe this is better as a try method.
Maybe, I mean, like it being them being methods instead of properties, or like whatever. Fine, it throw properties that we would expect to throw would be bad, but.
I was about to say the primary purpose is killing a process with children, and maybe we should have another API for that.
Well, if they're wanting to go up unless they're wanting to ask for all processes and ask whose parent is this guy or in the hash set of.
Well, I mean, his primary motivation seems to be this, right?
Yeah.
Which is, give me a way to walk the chain so I know who the children are that I need to terminate.
I mean, like, we already know that there are cases where you can't successfully enumerate the process list.
Yeah, but it's the other way around, right? I mean, like, you should be always able to see your children.
You can most of the time see your children.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's just the enumerate process list.
Going
upwards.
Going up is sometimes blocked. One reason that might be the case is if your parent runs in a different trust level than you, and Antares has their own weird custom packet logic anyway. Also, going down sometimes is blocked depending on the kind of process that you spawn, at least on Windows.
Right.
But I mean, if going down is blocked, it means you don't have permission to touch that process anyway. So it's okay if you skip it as part of the kill tree logic.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
It is. It is.
Maybe it needs to return a Boolean that I have to skip any children because I wasn't allowed to talk about them.
No, I mean, like, you won't even be able to enumerate them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Which means that as far as your worldview is concerned, you've successfully killed all the children.
This is a horrible way to describe it. What is bad is a poor child, but not far off. Get child process. Yeah, that's the other thing.
So direct descendants or recursive descendants.
Do we have kill actually on process? Is that what we might actually? We do. No, actually, yeah, we do.
It's called kill.
Somebody has an API called kill. Let me check where it is. But
Yeah, kill.
yeah,
That is the
kill.
public name of a Unix signal.
Yeah.
Except ours does what you think it does.
Yeah, I don't think we would.
I mean, kill with process tree seems reasonable to me. I mean, it means that there's a lot.
You would do kill with a Boolean instead of a new method kill tree.
Yeah. Why would you introduce a method overload for that? Or why would you introduce a new method name for that? Seems over the top. It's a different way to kill, right? Like, in that sense.
What happens if... So the thing about killing a single process is it can throw an exception and everything is still in a good state because the process is either killed or it's not. When you have kill tree and like you can't kill the fourth child process, for instance,
Keep going.
you keep going.
I would say, I mean, if you call this method, you could try to clean up, right?
And
So like,
then
why do you care? You just
I
keep
guess
killing as much as
We
you
could
can.
throw asyncs good old aggregate exception.
Here's all the ones I couldn't kill.
Yep. Here, I got like 6 exceptions. Here you go. I have a bundle of 6 exceptions.
Sure. I mean, as long as it's well-defined behavior, sure.
I mean, it's as well defined as it gets, I guess.
What's wrong with just handing the child process and letting them go one at a time and deal with the exceptions themselves?
So the reason is that the problem is the policy, right? If you walk up, you may not be able to walk up, you may not be able to walk down, so it's a bit of a fuzzy behavior, right? Like you have to add more API service, you have to define more policy.
Why?
The other one is just one method and it's just the best ever thing, right?
Well, I mean, adding the
But you're getting the list of processes in that method.
So, as in maybe one of the children, maybe one of the child processes was terminated while kill tree was going on. Like right now, the behavior of kill is that it just throws and stops in that case. I bet you're saying kill tree would continue, right?
Yeah.
So
Maybe I misunderstood. I was asking, why don't we just tell people to call get child processes?
I think it's
and then
because
look over them and call them.
because everybody will have a naive implementation that will work 80% of the time, and nobody will have an implementation that works correctly.
Yeah, it's robustness more like anything. Like I mean, it seems like the real scenario is kill tree.
Arguably, ours wouldn't be the one that's correct either. That's the problem. That's why I don't.
Yeah.
Baking in the policy of like trying our best and just fail, like this ignoring errors doesn't seem like the greatest solution either.
Well, it depends on what the behavior is, right? I mean, I think in general, I would say baking in policy, if nobody can agree on the policy, is a fine state. But what other policy could you possibly want?
You still might need some sort of reporting or maybe retries and other things on these processes.
I don't think anybody cares. I mean, like if you kill a process and you want to kill everything that this thing spawned, it is almost always guaranteed to be a cleanup scenario where you don't give a fuck whether somebody of these failed or not.
yeah.
You just want to kill as much as you can so you don't leave the machine in a good state. Like you're not going to take this information and put it anywhere. Right? You're not writing a log file with like,
Well, no,
oh yeah, I
mean,
just killed MS build and I killed 3 other worker processes and the compiler.
So
and
the
like,
policy decision would be if we loop everything recursively,
right.
and we hit a middle point in the tree, and we call kill, and it gives us access denied.
Right.
Do we go to its children or not?
No, you just stop. That's what I'm saying.
You just made a policy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
And maybe it's a fine policy, right?
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm
we made a
saying.
policy, yeah.
Right. So
I'm not disagreeing that there's a policy decision. All I'm saying is that
So I sort of agree
what
with
other
Wes.
policy would you possibly want to have?
Delete all the children.
But if you can, you can, right? That's
Yeah, generally, if you can't kill this guy, generally you can't kill beneath him as well. Right, generally.
It just depends on whether the process registered that it doesn't want to receive the kill signal, and that it did that as a specific thing instead of that it's at a different trust level.
Yeah.
The
sure.
especially on Unix, where you're allowed to grab sig term and say like, yeah, that's nice, but no. And so I think that maybe we want the enumerable of PID or process or whatever of get my children with optional recursiveness, and then
Even getting your children may fail. If you don't have access to the process, you're not going to get access to the children.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
if it's the throwy kind of fail, we shouldn't do the recursive. If it's the invisible kind of fail, then we can do the recursive. But
Don't get me wrong, I love the process explorer feature. So just right click and kill them. Oh, it's a trial tree. So I like the idea of the concept.
I'm actually trying to look at what their policy is.
all right. Maybe just point on what we just discussed.
Even for get child processes, we got to figure out what the policy is.
Yeah.
We do it recursively.
well, if the OS just simply doesn't tell you that you have a child process,
Well, so API
the OS have
It may
policy.
very well do that. I mean, in some cases, may very well.
API shape, like I would still recommend turning things like get parent process into either saying it can return null, or you turn it into try get parent process and remove the API that returns a parent process ID, because it's probably not the thing that you actually wanted.
So, I mean, you think that it would return null in the case where it either the parent is dead or you're not allowed to talk about it?
Yeah.
And instead of, because yeah, I guess there's, do you want it null for dead and throw for access denied, or do you want it null for both or throw for both?
I don't know if it's possible to tell the difference in all cases, to be honest. But
Well, but it'd be one thing to see, like, depending on how much metadata you get, and it's like, oh, I see that there's this thing and it has the relationship, and this clearly is the one who launched it, and you're like, great, I would like to go get the information from the PEP that we need to create the process object, and it's like, oh, no, you're way overreading now.
Yeah.
You have overstepped
So
your
it's
bounds.
like, at that point, like, why even tell you that you had a parent, right? If you can't act on that information, what's the purpose of having the information?
Some kids like to know they're adopted.
Thanks, Jack.
It's the best analogy I could come up with. Yeah, so I think it would be reasonable that it would return null.
Yeah. To say, like, if failure for any reason, return null.
This device could not be used? What does that mean?
You don't have a device. The device returned null. You're okay.
But the device told me the device could not be used. I can't.
Have you finished your homework? Like, is it locking you out until you write that book report?
I can't pin unlock. I wonder if it's angry because its password changed there.
Who owns process right now?
I'm gonna go with Jeremy.
Jeremy, cool.
Yep. Maybe Steve. But it feels like Jeremy can.
Okay, I added my 2 cents to it, but I haven't done anything.
No, I can't. All right. Pin unlock didn't work, but smart card unlock did. This is why peripherals are useful.
This is all intrinsics. God damn it. That's amazing. I go to the second page and it says no results.
I think that means you're done, sir.
Gotta love predictable results.
Or you don't have permission to see the second page.
Think. All right, so ItemRef, ref element accessor for times that already have an indexer. And this also looks very familiar. Why? Okay, so Jan had some additional feedback. somebody describe why it's a broken API?
So what they're looking for is the ability to return, if you have a dictionary TKT value and T value happens to be a struct, they're looking for a way to not copy the struct when returning it. They just want to return a reference to it instead.
No, I get that, but why is Jan saying it's broken? He says, well, no notice that this was approved. This is pretty broken for listed dictionary.
Well, if you provide a mutable ref to the key, at that point you have problems because now hash codes no longer match up. I don't know why it would be broken for value though.
Maybe I'm missing something, but I think this was not for the particular API. This was more a pattern that we approved. That's at least how I saw it. Yes. Okay, so this issue was
It makes sense on things like list.
naming convention. Wasn't particular set of indexers. Sorry, I should say. Fuck it, I'm typing it again in my other editor because it's horrible to do this on a different screen. Alright. I'm not being a bit of a jerk.
I'm looking over the policy the task manager has for killing children.
And it's
So what they do is they attempt to kill everything in the tree except for the task manager process itself, because that would suck. And then they report back a single failure if anything failed.
so, but they are basically resuming, and then they just give you an aggregate error effectively at the end.
It's not even aggregate, it's just like
The first
success
one.
or failure. But they
Yeah.
just return literally true or false.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I mean, like,
But they also, interestingly, exclude themselves from the list of children killed.
so why is this? We should probably have pulled this back to API network. API. All right. So I think that we're done for today.
Yeah.
All right. Let
I'll
me disconnect the stream.